Coming up on this week's podcast, what next for Max Verstappen after his astonishing GT racing debut performance around the Nordschleife? It's the Azerbaijan Grand Prix coming up, so can Ferrari finally end its winless run around a circuit where Charles Leclerc has scored 4 consecutive poles without a victory, or will it be another McLaren Verstappen-dominated weekend? And we discuss a surprise contender for that vital number 2 seat at Red Bull for 2026 and beyond. All this and more, it's time for the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. Hello and a very warm welcome to this somewhat special edition of the Racing News 365 podcast. No folks, do not adjust your sets. You are not seeing things. Yes, it is me, Ian Parks, doing the hosting on this occasion. That is simply because our good friend Nick Golding, your regular podcast host, is away on a well-deserved holiday in Turkey. That's coming to an end. Nick will be back with us for this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which we are naturally going to discuss in quite some depth as part of our preview show. Many other topics coming up as well, along with Max Verstappen's appearance at the Nordschleife, his debut there in the GT4 car, in that GT class category, that 4-hour race. So that's going to be a fascinating topic that Sam, myself and Fergal are all going to discuss. So without further ado, very warm welcome first of all to 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Samuel Coop. I know, we just got to keep it going, Sam. It's Nick's thing. I know I'm hosting, but it's way of introducing, so just got to keep that flag flying, pal.
Well, thank you very much, man, myth, and legend, Ian Parks.
Oh, yes, I can't introduce myself that way, can I? That would just be completely wrong.
Oh yeah, like it'd be really kind of If I started introducing myself with the award, that would be really embarrassing.
Really embarrassing.
So thankfully, well, I said not thankfully because I wish you wouldn't mention it all the time. But anyway, but no, I'm all good. I'm in the midst of moving, so my personal life away from work has been very stressful, very chaotic the last couple of weeks. So this may actually be my final podcast in my old home before
in that house,
before moving. So yeah, exciting.
They do say it is one of the most stressful things in life, moving house. So I can only wish you well on that, and I'm sure all our listeners and viewers as well will do the same, because anybody who's been through it will know the stresses and strains as to exactly what that entails. And we have a very special guest star standing in this week. It is a man who's just come out of a very special party this past weekend. Everybody's favourite Irishman. That is now going to be your moniker, by the way, Fergal. Fergal Walsh, one of our Racing News 365 writers. Hello, Fergal. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Yes. I had a great weekend. Me and my now fiance got engaged. About 2 months ago. So we had a little get together at the weekend with joining the two families, and it went smoothly. No arguments, no headbutting between two families. So it's a good start.
So on this Monday morning, and this is when we're recording the podcast, folks, how is the head? Clear? Good to go for this podcast?
Yes, good to go. Good thing we weren't recording yesterday. Otherwise, it could have been a bit of a different story. But no, fresh, ready to go.
We never do a podcast on a Sunday, that's for sure.
No. How are you, Ian?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Actually, I had a nice weekend off. I know, Sam, you worked all weekend, so you're coming into this full of knowledge, especially from Max Verstappen's Nordschleife outing. So you're going to be able to tell us all about that first up initially. I'm going to follow the Nick Golding thing, though. I have got a question for you two guys to try and answer. Bit of a general knowledge question. Of course, it's naturally about this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which we are going to discuss first. And the question simply is, this will be the 9th edition of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Bearing in mind, the very first one was called the European Grand Prix for some very strange reason, even though, of course, Azerbaijan is effectively in Asia, as we all know. But nevertheless, it had the moniker the European. So it is going to be the 9th. So over the past 8 versions of the race in Baku, let's put it that way, how many drivers have converted pole position into race victory? And if you get the right number, can you then answer which driver, which team, which year?
That's a very good question
there. It is.
Because I thought you were going to go, how many race winners have there been? And that's a bit too easy because we all know that there's only one repeat winner in Sergio Perez.
Yeah. That's why I didn't go for that question, mate. It's far too easy. So, Sam, do you have an answer for me?
I'm going to go 3. I don't know why, but I'm going to go 3 because it's quite a difficult circuit to convert to pole to victory because
just as Charles Leclerc.
Well, exactly. Like, he's had 4 poles in a row there.
4.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So that gives you a little bit of a hint that Charles has had the past 4 in a row and never converted it. So, Fergal, what about you?
Yeah, actually, that's right. 3's then high, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to go through it in my head, and it definitely hasn't happened a lot, if at all. So
it has happened. That's another clue.
Okay.
If Jake Nickel was on this, Jake would have got it straight away. Jake's our resident stat guru, folks, another one of our Racing News 365 writing team. And literally his statistical knowledge is off the charts at times. We just type a question into our Slack channels that we use to work on. And Jake, if he's working that day, will instantly come on and give us the answer. So he would have nailed this straight away.
Sometimes when he's not working as well. Sometimes he'll just pop up, you're like, hello.
Okay.
I'll go for 2. I'll go for 2.
So you've got the right answer. That's the right number. So can either of you now get the years and the drivers? One that should be I thought one would be really obvious.
I think 2016 is. I think 2016 was Nico Rosberg.
Yeah, well done. There you go. I was there for that one, and it was like we all looked at that race at the time,
really dull,
and it was like dull. We thought, oh God, this is never gonna catch on if this is what we've got to look forward to for the rest of however long the contract might be at that particular time. But it has produced some wonderful racing over the years and incidents and accidents and safety cars and all that we're going to get into in a short while. So one more, Fergal. Do you know it? One more pole position.
No, I'm
no.
If I had to guess, I'd say 2017.
No, it's 2019. Valtteri Bottas.
I was thinking it might be Valtteri Bottas. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There we go. Well, there we go. That's our starter for 10, as they say. And now moving swiftly on, we've got obviously the Azerbaijan Grand Prix coming up this weekend. It's one of my favorites. It has actually become one of my favorite Grand Prix now. I just think, as I mentioned, as I was alluding to just then with regard to the question, it has produced, apart from that 2016 episode, which was absolutely dire, has produced some wonderful historic incidents and moments over the years. One of those, as I mentioned as well, Charles Leclerc, 4 consecutive pole positions. He has yet to convert one of those into a race victory. Second once, third once, fourth once, and a DNF. The suggestion from Fred Vasseur post-Italian Grand Prix was that this race in particular was going to be one of Ferrari's best opportunities over the closing 8 races for his team to finally get that win, because as we know, it has been lacking. Last year, Ferrari were first and third on the grid with Charles and Carlos. Charles finished second. Carlos crashed out, of course, in a great late race incident with Sergio Perez. Sam, coming to you first, do you think, given the way McLaren has performed this season, given the way that in particular Max Verstappen performed so brilliantly at Monza, that Ferrari has finally got that chance of getting its monkey off its back around Baku, and in particular Charles Leclerc after those 4 straight poles without a victory?
I do. I think it's the best chance. And whether or not they will actually be able to convert that even into pole or victory, clearly remains to be seen at this stage. But Charles Leclerc has managed to drag something out of that Ferrari each year, even when it hasn't looked like it was competitive heading into this round. And Ferrari have been very clear in the last few weeks that that they have made steps. Whilst they haven't necessarily been reflected in the results at this stage, Zandvoort was an absolute disaster for the team, in many ways through no fault of its own. And then it was handicapped again by kind of, the after effects of that weekend in the Netherlands at Monza. And so it couldn't really kind of I guess, display the progress it feels that has been there since the summer break. So they are in a good position. And Baku is one of those races that does throw up surprises. It throws up chaos, even when it has appeared to be post 2016 a little bit of a dud. There has often been that injection of chaos into the race that provides ample opportunity for drivers to kind of, finish in a position you wouldn't necessarily expect. And that could actually be Ferrari's route to victory. However, I think Ferrari will be very careful with how they manage the weekend, because Fred Vasseur has been also very clear that whilst they want to achieve a first win of the season, they are the only one of the big four that haven't so far. Finishing second in the Constructors' Championship is more important. So you have to imagine that there won't be undue risks taken around a circuit that, as we saw last year with Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz, can provoke incidents even late in the race.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen as well, of course, Lewis Hamilton yet to even get off the mark podium-wise.
Yep.
Fergal, what do you reckon? Could this be the opportunity for Lewis if Ferrari has the car, as Fred has suggested, as it has shown in the past as well around that circuit? Or given what we've seen, as I say, from Max with top-line speed there to Monza, and as I say, given the overall performance of the McLaren. Oscar Piastri won there last year, by the way, folks, just in case you didn't quite know that one, as to who finished ahead of Charles Leclerc. Do you think this is Lewis's opportunity to finally get that first podium, Fergal?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that when Sam was speaking there, that, it's not only an opportunity for Leclerc to grab a victory, but also for Lewis to, like I said, finally get that podium. But I mean, Lewis's track record across the entire calendar is mostly, fantastic. He has multiple race wins at various circuits, and this Baku track is kind of an outlier a little bit in that, he doesn't have that huge tally of wins like he does at other tracks. Just one victory for himself there in 2018. So historically, it's not really been Lewis's track. But yeah, I mean, like you said, if that Ferrari car can wrestle its way towards the front of the grid, it could very well be an opportunity for Lewis to finally get on that podium. I don't think any of us really thought it would take this long for him to get into that top three, but it is absolutely a big opportunity for Lewis to do that.
I think it was Didier Pironi took 19 rounds to get his first podium.
Come to that, yeah.
Were
just
you?
about to mention
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So yes,
go on. So
he's getting perilously close to that, isn't he? He's at 16, soon to be 17 if he doesn't get one in Baku.
So they've got Baku, Singapore, then Austin. That'll be 19, and then Mexico will be the 20th. So he's got these just very few number now of opportunities. I mean, in fairness to Lewis, I know what he's like to a certain extent. If it happens, it happens. He genuinely will not be bothered. I mean, let's face it, he set many other astonishing records over the course of his career. Yes, this would be an unwanted one should it happen. But in all honesty, is he going to be that bothered? No. Of course, he's obviously going to want to get that first podium Ferrari. It's going to be in the back of his mind a little bit that he's not achieved it yet. But as I say, overall, as we've discussed on many occasions with regard to our previous podcasts and our updates, my belief has long been that he's building towards 2026. The change of regulations, the better opportunity he will likely feel with a full year under his belt, getting to know everybody, getting to know the ins and outs of the factory, the way the team works, its nuances, with the car that he's had to encounter this year, certain ways of the way that car has operated compared to his Mercedes of the past, and some of the things he's tried to implement and change there. So, as I say, just getting back to the bottom line, I honestly don't think it's going to be a major concern for him if he did go these next 4 Grand Prix without a podium, and he did take that record off Didier Pironi. Yep, Baku overall, though, guys, as I've mentioned, has been a really classic race on numerous occasions. You're going to look back at some of the incidents that we've had in the past, even last year, Carlos Sainz and Checo Perez taking one another out. I mean, it's now built itself up to almost like expectation level with regard to a safety car. So
it has, and as I kind of pointed out earlier, there's always that anticipation throughout the race. There's you hear talk of a safety car window, and that translates into when can you pit and when is it wise to, and so all the pit walls will be constantly looking throughout the race, and kind of it makes it incredibly difficult to strategize for the teams, and that essentially leads to a lot of insecurity and potential mistakes for some of the teams, because you can get really unlucky with when you pit or when you don't pit, and it's the way it's laid out. You go from very, very high speed. It's one of the longest straights, if not the longest straight on the calendar, down into turn one, and then there's that series of 90-degree corners. But then there's also some really, really slow sections. And so not only does that, kind of breed chaos, it also means there's a real difficult compromise to make when it comes to setup. How do you balance wanting that very, very low drag approach for the straight, which is so important when it comes to lap time, and then wanting a more high downforce setup for the corners? And again, that compromise then breeds into qualifying versus the race. Do you want a quick car over one lap? Or do you want a car, that can ultimately fight through do you want a car that can fight through the field or hold off teams if you have ended up in a kind of an undue qualifying spot? So it is a really tricky weekend for teams to try and navigate.
It's another tricky weekend potentially as well for Yuki Tsunoda, and we've discussed his position on many occasions. That second driver seat, of course, big decision looming for both Red Bull team principal Laurent Mekies and advisor Helmut Marko, and that it's been announced as well that Laurent confirmed that they're not going to leave it until the back end of the season, that it's actually going to be a decision taken beforehand. And one of the drivers that I'd like to potentially throw into the mix, despite the fact that, he's got a Williams contract and Williams have turned around and said, he and Carlos Sainz are a driver pairing. But I've always wondered now about Alex Albon going back to Williams. We know it's something that Alex has mentioned previously in the past as well about being in the back of his mind. And the reason why I mention Alex, and it's obviously very highly unlikely that he will be at Red Bull in 2026. But nevertheless, he was part of the Red Bull family for quite some time. He had a year and a half alongside Max Verstappen. And for the most part, he performed really well if you look at his results. Okay, it wasn't the seconds and the thirds that Red Bull wanted behind Max's firsts over that given period of time. But nevertheless, he was up there with his results. Obviously, he was then pushed away effectively by Red Bull, and of course eventually he joined Williams. And this season, the reason why I'm mentioning Alex is because he has had what I consider to be quite an astonishing season in that Williams. 16 Grand Prix so far, and of that 16 Grand Prix, he unfortunately had 3 successive retirements right in the middle part of the season. But either side of that, 13 Grand Prix, he's finished in the points on 11 occasions. 4 times he's finished 5th, a couple of 6th, or 6th, a couple of 7ths, and he's 7th in the driving standings. He is having an absolutely, for me, astonishing season. And as I say, if it weren't for the fact that he had got this Williams contract, you would assume, Fergal, that he would be a potential contender for going back there and being alongside Max Verstappen, if not next season, then maybe somewhere down the line if he continues that kind of form of Williams.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that I can't remember what race it was this year, but James Vowles, the Williams team principal, was asked about that topic. What Alex could do back at Red Bull, and Vowles said that he believes he would be a different animal, to quote him exactly, a different animal alongside Max compared to what he was in that 2019-2020 period. I think for a lot of people, it would not surprise me if they have Albon as their driver of the season so far. He came into the year sort of. I think you actually wrote a piece on it, Sam, earlier in the year about how it was going to be the real test this year for Alex with Carlos coming into the team. And I think he's exceeded expectations. Alex has up against Carlos. I mean, sure, Carlos has been a little bit unlucky at times, but Alex has been that star performer in that midfield battle and really proven that he is worthy of a top drive, in my opinion. Like you said, Ian, it is quite unlikely, I think, that he will go to Red Bull next year, but I think he's definitely on the radar, maybe not even for Red Bull, maybe for the likes of Mercedes, possibly. We don't know, but he, no doubt, James Vowles, I think, will want to keep him secure at Williams, and who knows if Williams themselves can grow with the vision that James Vowles wants and has in his mind, maybe he could be a contender at Williams in the coming years. But for sure, he's been just really, really astonishing this year, and that track record of those 11-point finishes, incredible, really, really incredible.
He's actually scored 70 of the team's 86 points. I'll come to you next, Sam, on the next point I'm going to raise. 70 of the team's 86 points. That 86-point total for Williams is more this one season, or in the 16 races, than in the previous, I think it's 4 or 5 seasons combined, quite astonishingly. 7, is it? Wow. Thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. But as Fergal mentioned there, Sam, obviously, with Carlos Sainz coming in after his 4 seasons at Ferrari, James obviously made a big play for trying to get Carlos in the team, and he's continuing to talk him up as much as he possibly can, but it has been a struggle for Carlos this season, and it's not been the blowout performance that people were expecting of Carlos towards Alex. Instead, it's been the other way around, from with Alex against Carlos. Do we see Carlos as a bit more like Lewis at Ferrari? Is this a transitional year for Carlos as well before, again, we look at the regulatory set for 2026? And do we then perhaps see both Alex and Carlos being a little bit more aligned? How do you feel about that?
I believe it is in many ways. I think he's in quite a similar situation to Lewis, but maybe without the same extent of press coverage because of Williams not being Ferrari, to put it plainly. And Carlos actually was very, very clear heading into the year that it's going to take him, he kind of pinned it at 10 rounds at least to kind of really find his feet with the team. But he did speak kind of at depth and multiple times about how difficult it is to move teams. Lewis obviously, kind of caught a lot of headlines when he said in some ways it's more difficult to join a new team than it is to enter F1 in the first place. And I think that's an area that's often underappreciated, just how difficult it is to move teams. It's obviously the same industry, there are a lot of similarities, but the ways of working, the culture, the designs of the car, the components, all these little things add up to a very, very big change of environment. And it can take drivers, I think, longer than some people might often give them credit for. So I think you are seeing that transitional phase for Carlos, very much so, and that's reflected in the points. He's also had his slice of bad luck, but I don't think that should detract from just how strong Alex has been. Even if Carlos was in his second year at Williams, the level that Alex is performing at is very, very difficult to say that Carlos would be ahead of him. It certainly would be closer, you'd imagine, but there's a big disparity in points, as you pointed out. So yeah, it's this year, and I think in many ways that's why Williams wanted to get a driver like Carlos in this year, because James Vowles talks, kind of many, many times for a long time about how Williams is on a long-term target, a long-term trajectory, and they would actually kind of, sacrifice this year, last year, even next year to a certain degree for more sustained success in kind of 2027 and beyond. So it all kind of, leads in that same direction of we need to get these pieces in place now to be the team that we want to be, to return this team to its former glory. So yeah, it's not going to be something that will concern Carlos. I think if you're getting into the middle part of next year and there's still that disparity in performance between him and Alex, I think that's when you start to go, okay, this is not the Carlos we expected, or the Carlos that has grown from being one of the most underrated drivers to a more adequately appreciated driver on the grid.
As always, folks, it's at this stage of our podcast, it's that usual shout out. If you love what you're listening to or love what you're watching, then please, as always, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are approaching 25,000 subscribers, which would be a really nice landmark to hit in a week or two's time. So please, as always, hit and like that, smash and subscribe that button, please. That's always a real pleasure for us if you can do that. And as always, if you're enjoying what you're listening to and watching as well, then please post your comments below this video, because we do like reading them, the good ones anyway, for the most part. We're always a pleasure to try and have interaction with you and dialogue as well by commenting on some of those that we do actually read. Speaking of Carlos Sainz, again, another little bit on Carlos. We had, very unusually, a decision made on a non-Grand Prix Saturday. And that was, of course, the right of review that was looked into by the FIA regarding the incident between Carlos and Racing Bull's Liam Lawson during the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, of course, Carlos picked up a 10-second time penalty that he had to serve in race because the penalty or the decision was made by the stewards during the race at the time. But, of course, he also had 2 penalty points added to his super license. Williams, and in particular Carlos Sainz, quite vocal after that Grand Prix, made his point clear that he could not understand the penalty. It naturally led to Williams applying for a right of review just ahead of the Italian Grand Prix weekend. But then, of course, because it took so long to get the Dutch Grand Prix stewards together, that they live in different parts of the world, and get the relevant people from Williams and Racing Bulls on board as well to take part in that right of review hearing that took place on Friday of last week, it wasn't until Saturday that we finally got the verdict. Sam, I know you were working over the weekend. I know you took part in that, in the writing side of things. Was it the right call? It sounded like it, given the defence that Williams made and some of the evidence in particular that wasn't available to the stewards at the time of the Grand Prix. And I'll come to you, Fergal, with another question after that. Is it time that some of these decisions are made post-Grand Prix, even if it takes a while for those results to come through, to the detriment, of course, as we saw to Carlos, who got a 10-second penalty? Sam, over to you first and that steward's document.
It's on the to address it back, back to front almost. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for the stewards in many ways. We've discussed this in the past. There will always be this level of dissatisfaction if you make a call too quickly or if you delay and make a call. It feels like they did make that decision too quickly in race in Zandvoort, and the general consensus is that they have done the right steps by the FIA by rowing back as far as they can on this penalty. And I say as far as they can because obviously they can't remove. There's no infrastructure in place to remedy that 10-second penalty that Carlos has served already, because especially if you throw in the mix of safety cars and so on and so forth that happen later in the race, you add 10 seconds onto Carlos, or you remove that 10-second penalty from Carlos's race, you end up throwing him into the middle of the points, and he wasn't going to finish there anyway. So you can't do anything with that. However, what they have done, and this is what Williams have been pushing for, is they've removed the 2 penalty points license from his FIA super license. And that is important for them, just partly as a precedent and partly to kind of understand that these things can be looked at. I think it's in some ways a big moment for F1 and the FIA in that relationship with the stewards and penalties, because previously we've seen these rights reviews dismissed, and this is, I think everyone felt that it was going to be overturned, at least as partially as it was.
Yeah, I did suggest that was going to be the case, yeah. Because
ultimately you look at that incident and you go, that is a racing incident, and that is what it has been reclassified as. So, the feeling is that it's the right call. It took a little bit of time. I think we could see the stewards waiting a little bit more to get more information before jumping to a verdict in the future. That will undoubtedly, as I said, come with criticism, but ultimately people want the right call. And Williams expressed their gratitude with the decision that's been made, whilst also reiterating the frustration that the penalty had to be served in the first place. And it was an incident that obviously had ruined Carlos's race, and now that was compounded by the initial penalty.
The key thing as well that came out for that steward's doc, and just to add, in case people are unaware or didn't read fully through the steward's document, was the fact that when a team launches a right review, for the FIA to consider it and move it on to another stewards panel, is that there has to be significant, relevant and new evidence that wasn't available to these stewards at the time. And what emerged, or what Williams was able to hand to the stewards, was a 360 camera that was on Carlos Sainz's Williams, and also footage of the rear-facing camera that was on the back of Liam Lawson's Racing Bulls. So you've got to think that if that evidence was there, and obviously I appreciate that the stewards have an awful lot to consider and take on board, and they obviously must be very mindful as well that they want to get these decisions out in a timely fashion. Nevertheless, Fergal, coming to you now, when that evidence is there that wasn't available at the time, it again raises the point of, surely if you've got the opportunity to wait until after the race and look at it, why do you not therefore take the time to do so after a race, even if it is to the detriment overall of certain race results, and leaving fans wondering what's going to happen with that decision? Is it going to be in favour of our driver? If you're a particular fan of a driver, is it going to be in favour of the other driver, etc., if you know what I'm saying? So, as I say, if the evidence is there, why not wait until you've got it all at your disposal before making a decision?
So, yeah, I think it would be to the detriment of yourself and Nick as well, having to record in ungodly hours if the stewards do wait. But
we've had a few late nights, me and Nick, that's for sure.
Yeah, especially with the that USA leg of the season coming up. But yeah, of course, every situation is different. It's a case by case. All these racing incidents have to be looked at differently. And at the time, watching that Lawson Sainz incident, it did seem that it was very unfair for Carlos. But I think the stewards have a duty to get these decisions right at the end of the day. And like Sam said, you're never going to please everyone. There's no way that's ever going to happen. But the stewards are there for that reason, to make sure they use their knowledge, their experience, the racing guidelines to implement the penalty fairly and by the rule book. Obviously, they got it wrong at Zandvoort, and that led to a review. And it is nice in a way that we have that opportunity to be able to go back and to change the result, and not leave a sour taste in everyone's mouth, feeling that it was the wrong way to the wrong penalty to hand out. But I think there's lessons to be learned from this. It's a little bit messy, a little bit just overall uncoordinated. And at the end of the day, if there is any doubt from the stewards when analysing an incident, it is always best just to leave it till after the race. Let the two teams come up, the two drivers say their piece, and then make a decision. But when you hand in the middle of the race like that, when the certain aspects of the penalty can't be reversed, then it's just going to lead to more problems. But thankfully, now it's been somewhat rectified.
Yeah, Sam, I can see you wanted to follow on.
Well, I was just going to say, if I were Haas, I would be looking at this overturned right to, or accepted right to review, and I'd be looking at the Ollie Bearman Carlos Sainz incident from the Italian Grand Prix, going, actually, there might be something we can do about this here, because the feeling after that race was actually that was pretty harsh. Like, not just the penalty by the rules. You could argue that absolutely Ollie Bearman was in the wrong place and he needed a penalty for that. But it was really unfortunate. But 2 penalty points licensed for Ollie Bearman on the back of that does feel steep. And especially if you look at the wider context of what Ollie is up against at the moment, he has now on 10 of 12 allowed penalty points on his super license. He has to navigate until the end of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix without accruing 2 more. He's 19 rounds into his into his F1 career, if you include the 3 from last season. So he's getting, half a penalty point per round. He's got 4 rounds to go. So if he continues with that trajectory, he's going to get banned. So yeah, if I were Haas, I'd be looking at it and going, I think we need to submit something here, because just for the protection of your own driver, they experienced last year with Kevin Magnussen how disruptive it can be in many ways to have a driver banned, even though it did ultimately provide a foundation for Ollie Bearman to gain even more experience before his debut season.
Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head, and I don't know if you guys can recall as well, how long a team has, once a decision has been made, to then potentially launch that right of review. I can't recall if it's 7 days or 14 days. Because if it's 7 days, then obviously time has elapsed.
Yeah.
Done and gone. If it's 14, then obviously still has that window of opportunity leading up to this weekend in Baku. But as I say, off the top of my head, I'd need to look that one up. Can't quite recall. But you would have thought, yes, if there was that chance that Haas had an opportunity to do something, then they would rightly take it, because to leave Ollie in that precarious position in his full rookie season as well, it's a really awkward time for him, as you say, over these next few races. I wouldn't want to be in Ollie Bearman's shoes, because the last thing he would want in his rookie season is to have a race ban. Moving swiftly on, because we're conscious of time, and one of the other, and probably the biggest talking point over the weekend, aside from that right review decision from the stewards, was, of course, Max Verstappen's appearance at the Nordschleife, taking part in a GT race that weekend. Of course, there was huge hype around it, and rightly so, because whilst Max had a tour of the Nordschleife in his moniker as Franz Hermann not so long ago, this was Max Verstappen competing as Max Verstappen. But of course, he had a few things to get through first before he could actually take part in that race. So take us through it and give us an overview as to what Max had to go through.
So Max he had quite the weekend in Germany, all in pursuit to set out the stall. Max has long loved endurance racing, has long been interested in it, and one of those goals that he wants to kind of reach is competing in the 24 hours of Nürburgring race. And in order to do so, there's certain criteria that you have to satisfy. Such is the beast that is the Nordschleife. And, it's called Green Hell, the Green Hell for a reason. It's a very dangerous, formidable challenge for anyone, even a 4-time F1 world champion. So in order for Max to reach that point in which he can take part in that 24-hour race, he needed to obtain a permit, a license. And that's a category A license that he ultimately needs, but there are steps he needed to take to get to that point first. So, first of all, he had to take part on Friday in a driving and a written or theory examination. So he spent a little while going behind basically a pace car around the circuit. The instructor has spoken glowingly about the experience, how much he enjoyed it, how much he enjoyed interacting with Max, and how highly he thought the fact that Max is respecting this process, because there are many people, Ralf Schumacher, Helmut Marko, who have called for Max to be granted a waiver given the level of experience he obviously has. But there's a big contingent, including his instructor, who's called Andreas Gullman. I hope I'm not butchering that pronunciation there. And also ex-F1 driver Timo Glock, who have very much been in favour of Max going through the steps, and they're a big fan of what it says about him and how happy he has been to comply with that process. So you had to satisfy that criteria in order to be granted his Category B licence. And that is what ultimately allows you to compete in a GT4 car, in a Porsche Cayman GT4 car, which he did so on the Saturday. And so he was in a detuned car as a rookie, so slower than some of the other cars in his class around him. And in qualifying, you got another glimpse, a first glimpse as Max Verstappen, not Franz Hermann, of just how capable Max is going to be in a GT car. Immediately on a wet circuit, he went out and was about a minute a lap faster than the second fastest rookie in his class. There's only 3 of them. But the Nordschleife is a very long track, if you don't know.
Yeah.
Lap times are in excess of 10 minutes. So yeah, you're thinking a minute's huge. It is still a big gap, but there's some context for you there. Ultimately, by the end of the qualifying session, he was 6th in class, the fastest rookie, 25 seconds faster than the other rookie, the next best rookie, and 27th, I believe it was, on the grid. So he was actually competing with other people in his class who weren't in detuned cars, such as his ability, and natural aptitude. So that was already a highly, highly impressive result. And then in the race, so in order to attain his Category A license, he needed to complete 14 laps and get 2 classified results. So you'd think naturally that means 2 races.
Yeah.
But actually, there is a way around this, a caveat to those rules, a nuance that allows you to do it all in one go if you compete in 2 cars simultaneously. Now, it was a 4-hour race in the NS series at Nürburgring, which would allow Max to race half, say 7 laps in one car, and then do 7 laps in the other car and get 2 classified results and satisfy the 14-lap criteria. So what Max did was actually a little bit different because there was some mechanical issues with his second car. So Max completed 14 of the 24 laps that his primary car completed. He finished, I believe it was 6th in class, 7th in class, and 27th overall. So he still had a brilliant result with his co-driver. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get that second classified result, even though he had done the 14 laps he needed to. But he was granted an exemption by a panel, which was labelled to do this. This isn't a hugely strange thing to occur, but they felt that he had shown everything they needed to see from him. He had tackled changeable conditions, code 60 yellows, double yellows, varying degrees of difficulty. He'd navigated through moving traffic of different classes and different speeds and all that comes with endurance racing. And that's a skill that he never would have encountered in his single-seater career because everyone's in the same spec car. Yeah. So all these little things that were really important, and he has managed to do that. So he has now got his Category A license. That allows him to, in 2 weeks' time, between Baku and the Singapore Grand Prix, to race his Ferrari 296 GT3 car, which is what he set, we believe, an unofficial lap record in as Franz Hermann. So he'll be back competing, and he is basically now in a position to compete in the 24 hours of Nürburgring, and has shown just how brilliant he is yet again with the result that he managed to attain over the weekend as well.
Fergal, I know you were partying hard over the weekend, mate, in particular on the Saturday when Max was doing all this, but nevertheless, you must have been, when you picked up the story and read about it, just Max being Max, or should we be in any way surprised that he's achieved this and done this over the course of this particular weekend? He's a new dad at the end of the day. Surely he should be at home looking after his little one, not going off gallivanting to the Nordschleife and go and pick up an A license so he can go racing back at the circuit again in a couple of weeks' time. As I say, just Max being Max, though, isn't it? It's what we've come to expect from him.
Yeah, it is Max being Max. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone in this world who loves racing more than Max Verstappen does. Yeah, I mean, even when he's not at race weekends, he's at home on a simulator, and there he's probably set more laps of the Nordschleife than most other drivers in the world anyway. So, yeah, not really surprised about his pace. We all know his abilities. We all know what he can do. He certainly showed that at the weekend. And I think it's great that we're getting this sort of attention on this subject, because I think the biggest downfall of the current F1 schedule of having too many races is that we never get to see drivers anymore take these sort of opportunities to go race somewhere else. I mean, Fernando Alonso had to skip the Monaco Grand Prix in 2017 just to race the Indy 500. You know, it's very rare we see something like this, but I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's probably fantastic for the drivers of that category too, of that racing series, to be able to go wheel to wheel with an F1 driver, an F1 champion. And I would love to see it more often. And definitely I'll be tuning in to watch Max go again when he does get back behind the wheel.
It'll be 2 weeks' time as we record this. We're less than 2 weeks now. If it comes between Baku and Singapore, we can only hope, of course, that he's got wife Kelly's blessing to do all of this. Poor woman, bearing in mind she's sat at home changing all those nappies that Max is managing to avoid, and of course getting decent night's sleep rather than being woken by his new young one. So nevertheless, Max, you're obviously having fun, enjoying life, you're doing what you absolutely love, and all fair play to you for that. This has been the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast with me, Ian Parks. Normal service will be resumed this weekend with myself and Nick for the F1 updates, and Nick will be back next Monday for the post-Azerbaijan Grand Prix podcast. Tune in then, folks, for when we discuss all the fallout from that particular race. Thanks, as always, for watching and listening. Take care.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.